Well, hey, Jason.
What's up,
What's
man?
going on, brother?
Trying a new intro there, Greg.
I like it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's another one by yours truly, Jason Hamlin.
Hey,
You
man.
know,
It's
a little riff.
We did all those different intros that one night, and I forgot about that one. That's a pretty fun one.
This
Feel like
one-
I'm on a horse, riding into a battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something crazy.
That's what we like to think we do here on the podcast.
Yeah, right. There
really,
you go.
it's just two knuckleheads talking about politics, culture, and theology.
Theology, yeah, right.
How you been, man?
Man, I am a little tired today. I went to Kansas City over the weekend for a funeral, and I slept in the Kansas City airport last night.
Fun.
So yeah, man. So I pretty much had probably 8 hours of sleep within the past 2 or 3 days. So
but you ran in.
Yeah, we're running.
You ran into the cockpit and said, "I have to get
Yeah,
back to
yeah.
Detroit,
Well,
baby. I got a podcast."
Right,
to do."
right. I was like, well, we got delayed on the way there and on the way back. So I was like, I wonder if I should just call Greg and tell him he might have to do this one. But yeah, but no, we're here. We're ready.
Well,
yeah.
we miss you, and we're glad you didn't miss it because we have a special guest on here. We want to introduce him quickly before we get into newsy news. He is the litigation director for the Justice Center of Constitutional Freedoms, and is what we're going to be talking about tonight, the James Coates and Tim Stevens case. Mr. Jay Cameron is on the podcast. Jay, how are you, sir?
I'm well. Thanks a lot for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Our fake audience loves you.
That's not a fake audience. That's a real audience.
We hire extras to stand here and clap, Jay, just for you. So we're going to get into what Jay does, what Mr. Cameron does, and what we're going to talk about. But before we do that, let's get into two quick newsy news stories that I think are pertinent to what we're going to talk about tonight. Ready for some newsy news?
Oh, yeah.
Let's do it.
News, the news, the newsy news, the news, the news, the newsy news. We got some news. Oh, love that song. All right. So, the first news story that I had here, Richard Davis, president and CEO of MakeAWish America.
Okay.
And I'm reading from Holistic Health and More.
Okay.
From Instagram, but this is their quote. This is literally a new low for humanity. Terminally ill children will not be granted a wish from the Make-A-Wish Foundation unless, you guessed it, they're fully vaccinated.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Now, whichever side you're on with the vaccines, let's take a step back and realize what's going on with these children. And
so they're terminally ill.
Yeah.
They're Make-A-Wish, which is, for anyone who doesn't know what that is a foundation that grants a child a request.
Yep.
Mostly it's, terminal cancer as a child or something like that, a disease that's terminal. And they're saying now that they're not going to grant a wish to the children that are dying unless they're vaccinated.
Yeah.
And the people around them probably, I'm guessing, right?
More than likely.
What level of craziness have we got to?
I mean, I'm wondering if they all have to wear 3 masks as well, and a face shield. But yeah, this is, I mean, it was already kind of pretty much getting out of hand. I shouldn't even say kind of, it has gotten out of hand, but yeah, this is just nuts.
So Jay, is anything like that going on in Canada? I know we're going to get into the religious liberties aspect of it here in a few minutes, but do you see private corporations and nonprofits kind of kowtowing to this type of thought?
Yeah, it's epidemic in Canada as well. And some governments are saying that they're going to create, they don't say they're going to create a 2-tiered society, but they are creating a 2-tiered society by saying you can't travel, you can't move in between provinces, you can't attend social gatherings, events, those types of things without being vaccinated. So it's happening in Canada as well.
Wow.
Yeah. I've been hearing also with live concerts, they're going to have a section for vaccinated and non-vaccinated people. They're going to split people up. Disney on Ice is doing it. Broadway is saying don't show up unless you're vaccinated.
But a Journey reunion tour show is such a clean place to be anyway.
Right.
I mean, You know?
Right. Hey, don't stop believing, right?
Right. So what's our second story? Let's move on to the second one, then we'll get in with Mr. Cameron.
Definitely. So this comes from Global News. U.S. Senator requests Canada investigated for religious freedom violations over Alberta pastor's arrests. Now, this was on June 25th,
A few days ago.
2021.
Okay.
Yep. A U.S. senator has asked that Canada be investigated for violating religious freedom over the arrests of Alberta pastors accused of flouting COVID-19 restrictions.
Wow.
In a letter released Thursday, Missouri Republican Josh Hawley asked his country's Commission on International Religious Freedom to consider putting Canada on its special watch list. I am troubled that our Canadian neighbors are effectively being forced to gather in secret, undisclosed locations to exercise their basic freedom to worship. And we have a quote from Litigation Director Jay Cameron. I don't know if you guys know, but he's on the show tonight, of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, which is representing Stevens, has accused Alberta Health Services in a statement of being engaged in an intentional act of public deception and abuse of authority in arresting Pastor Stevens and others.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now we even have some congressmen, some senators from the United States getting involved too. I don't know how much weight that will carry.
Right.
But it's good to see that, other representatives in North America are understanding what's happening in Canada right now, which I think is a great segue story into introducing Mr. Jay Cameron. Jay, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms and what it is that you guys do, and then maybe give us an update on Pastor James Coates and Pastor Tim Stevens?
Sure. The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is a civil liberties organization in Canada. We're a registered charity. We accept no government money. And really, to boil it down, all we do is sue the government. And they give us lots of work these days because they have no respect for the Constitution and the civil liberties of Canadians. They have no respect for the written text of the Constitution or democracy itself, the checks and balances that are built into the rule of law. And so we're very busy. We litigate from coast to coast, and we represent a wide variety of people on freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion issues. And Pastor Coates and Pastor Stevens are two of our clients.
And can you just tell the audience, for those who might not know, can you just give a quick overview of those two cases and what you feel is being violated in those cases that you guys are representing?
Right. So, in Canada, despite the fact that the United States is open, for the most part, people are traveling again. People are moving about freely. Disneyland, even in California, is open. It's a surprise to many Americans to find out that Canada is still locked down in many, many places. In fact, Toronto, Ontario, probably still the most locked down place on the entire planet. In Alberta, you have a health dictator who is not accountable to the citizens. She was appointed, and she makes laws for millions of people without any legislative accountability, meaning so that there's no democratic check on her power. She does whatever she wants, whenever she wants, however she wants, and then the police have to do whatever she says. And so, I mean, it's a scary situation in Alberta, and she has said at various points in time, there's no indoor gatherings, or there's severe limits on indoor gatherings in churches specifically. Sometimes there are different rules for churches. And so some of our clients, they look at the Constitution and they say, well, the Constitution says we have a right to freedom of assembly and freedom of religion. And so we are going to assemble for the purposes of practicing our religion. And the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, not these health orders by this from this health dictator. And that has landed them in increasingly deeper conflict with the police and the health authorities in the province of Alberta. So much so that despite the fact that you could go to Walmart, you go to the liquor store, you can go buy pot, right? You can buy cannabis, which is legal in Canada. You cannot go to church. And so when Pastor Coates, week after week, would have a church service, eventually AHS came in with a SWAT team, barricaded the church with 3 layers of fencing, changed the locks, and the church has been meeting underground. And Pastor Coates was arrested He was in jail for 35 days. Okay, 35 days. 14 of those days was in solitary confinement,
Wow.
away from his wife and his children. And when he got out, now the health orders are not an arrestable offense, but what they said is, well, you failed to abide by the terms of your undertaking when you were released, and so you're arrestable for that. And so they arrested him and they held him, and so really it's nobody else in Alberta is being targeted like Christian pastors, because they are the voice of dissent, an organized voice of dissent against the lockdowns and the tyrants who are running society. And so Pastor Stevens, he's still in jail. It's been almost 2 weeks since he was arrested. He was wrongfully arrested, and the Justice Center is about to launch a lawsuit to sue the Alberta government over his wrongful arrest the first time. He's been in jail for 13 days as of today, because he held a church service on June 6th. And so he was arrested on June 15th, and he has been in jail. He has 8 children. He was arrested in front of his wife and children. His kids were crying. And, what did he do? Is he cooking meth?
Right.
Is he running drugs? Right? Is he involved in organized crime? No, his crime is ministering to hurting people who have lost their jobs. They've lost their retirement. Their domestic relationships are falling apart because of the lockdowns. And the church is a hospital for the sick and the hurting, and he's been ministering to the congregation, so they shut that church down as well, and he is in jail today. And the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms represents both of these principled gentlemen who recognize that there is such a thing as right and wrong, and that whatever the state says sometimes is not the right thing. And that there are higher obligations. They recognize that, and they believe that they have higher obligations to God, and that those supersede the authority of the state.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I thought I had read or seen in a news article that after 13 months of lockdown, James Coates, Pastor James Coates, is in court. And essentially, and I don't know how much you can speak to what's going on the legal side of it, but essentially, the attorneys were arguing for James Coates. Look, you have to have a scientific reason to have these mandates, to have these laws. And the government said, we don't have any scientific evidence for why we're shutting down and locking down. After 13 months of essentially soft tyranny, or tyranny, if you want to call it that, they have no evidence for these type of bureaucratic, made up laws. So, I mean, what foot does the Canadian government have to stand on here? I mean, what are they thinking?
Yeah, there's a number of really concerning elements about Pastor Coates' case. First of all, you have a government that refuses to go to court to justify why it's doing what it's doing. So first of all, you have somebody who is not democratically accountable making orders. Then you have a government who has been sued by Pastor Coates and is in court against a constitutional challenge to these health orders under which he has been operating, and the whole province has been operating. But when they have the opportunity to present science, because the Justice Center has world-class experts. We've retained, for example, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's from Stanford. He's one of the principal authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. He's one and we have a number of other high-profile experts to talk about whether or not these lockdowns are justified. The government has done everything in its power to delay having a court hearing. In fact, they asked for an adjournment into July. Meanwhile, churches are shut down. People are in jail. So that's a very significant issue. Sure. One of the other problems is that Pastor Coates' trial was bifurcated. It was split into 2 components. So the first question was whether or not there was an infringement. So he was arrested. Okay, he goes to jail. He's in jail for 35 days. His church is locked. The building is chained up. There's a fence around it, and they're meeting underground, like in China. They're hiding from the authorities because they are afraid of being arrested and incarcerated. Wow. That's what's happening in the neighbor right next to the United States. And the judge in the case came back with this decision. And unfortunately, he said, being arrested, having your church shut down, going to jail for 35 days, 14 days in solitary confinement, none of those things is an infringement of your constitutional right to assemble or to worship.
Wow.
And so you have a breakdown in Canada. I think it's really important to underscore for Americans what is happening in Canada. You have a breakdown in the systems that are in place to hold government power in check. Without those systems in place, you have rule by tyrants.
Mm.
And that's what's happening in Canada. And there's this old quote by this philosopher. His name is Baron de Montesquieu. Charles de Montesquieu.
Mm.
And he said, when the legislature and the executive are combined, there can be no liberty.
Mm.
And that is what's happening in Canada, because you have the power of the executive combined with the legislature, right? There is no democracy anymore. It's collapsed into one authoritarian person. And that there can be no liberty under such a form of government. And so you have a complete breakdown in the democratic checks and balances that are supposed to protect people from tyrannical government. And then you're supposed to have a judiciary, which is to apply the Constitution to hold government in check. And that, unfortunately, that judiciary is so far in Canada has been asleep at the switch. And I maybe I'll get somebody will complain about me saying that, but the plain wording of the Constitution says that there are fundamental rights and freedoms for Canadians. Freedom of religion, conscience, speech, assembly, and that these rights are fundamental, and the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. But what judges are doing is they're interpreting the health orders as supreme, and so it's a very scary situation in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, this entire situation, I mean, it really it hurts my heart to see the video. I mean, to see the headlines that are happening. I mean, it really does bring tears to my eyes to see the I'm sorry, I can't remember the Polish pastor's name that was just arrested in the middle of the highway. In the middle of the highway. I mean,
Like, what's the urgency there?
I know. I mean, this is just gone to a different level. But yeah, I mean, it is a right to be able to assemble. This is not something that we should even have to worry about as Christians. And I mean, our mandate comes from Hebrews 10, starting in verse 24, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. And then verse 25, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. I mean, whenever the church comes together, we don't just come together just
You gotta say hi.
yeah, for
Yeah.
just say hi. I mean, we're actually living out this Christian life, together. We are encouraging one another. I mean, the scripture says we should gather, and I mean, for the people that are at home alone, I mean, the suicide rates, the depression rates, I mean, there's so many things that are,
Overdose,
yeah,
mental
there,
health issues
yeah,
with the lockdowns.
domestic violence. I mean,
Canada's really going to suffer from that too if they're still in lockdowns like that. They're going
exactly,
to be seeing this well into
yeah.
2-3 years from now.
How long does it go? How long is long enough, to say we need to just be alone at our house. We shouldn't interact with anyone, because if you come within 10 or 6 feet of anyone, I mean,
Yeah.
you possibly may get this disease, this virus. But yeah, I mean, it really it makes me think about just the war on the church that's happening. And I mean, at the same time, I do know that Christ is going to be glorified through this. I mean, he is being
Sure.
glorified through this.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of people thinking and praying and just I mean, I don't know. Just there's so many good things are coming out of this, and justice will be done.
Sure.
God will not be mocked. And yeah.
On the flip side of that too, it's tough because you can be a citizen and you can thump your Bible at a magistrate or a judge and say, well,
Right.
this is what my Bible says. And they
Yeah.
go, hey, go pound sand.
Right.
We have a constitution. That's why I'm so grateful for guys like Jay and what they're doing at his organization, because you go look at, there are ways that we have to fight these things in the courts and with constitutional law and those things. And
it's great that we have that as Christian, because it
absolutely
pretty much backs us up.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
And then, and then even like you and I were talking about before is like, the whole thing is predicated upon a pandemic. I mean, this thing has a 2.5 R naught. It's a little bit more contagious than the flu.
Right.
Less people have actually died in the United States. Now I'm talking about from COVID alone, about 80,000 comorbidities in all the other cases, obesity, heart disease, cancer, terminal illness, whatever it is. And you just go, okay, is this even truly a pandemic? To then, like Jay was saying, have a bureaucrat who has we have absolutely no, the government loves bureaucrats because there's no restitution for voters. We can't go and vote out a bureaucrat. They're appointed. We have no say in the matter. And it sounds like that's what you're saying up there, Jay, in Canada. I would circle back around to this. What does this mean for the United States? Because we had Pastor Joe Boot on from Canada a few months ago, and he was really going, look at you in the United States, everyone else in North America really need to be watching what's happening in Canada. Because I know personally, culturally, we follow Canada about 5-10 years behind culturally. Maybe not legally with certain laws and our constitutions are different, but it seems like culturally, if Canada is the secular culture is accepting, hey, look, we just have to lock down and this is what we have to do. I don't know if America isn't that far behind. So what does this mean for United States listeners right now when we're hearing these things happening in Canada?
I think it's important to remember that freedom is a generational question. So, the right to assemble for the purposes of seeking redress for wrongs comes from William Penn. That's why it's in the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And William Penn was operating in a system where the British had said you can not gather for the purposes of having religious service with any more than 5 people. And there was a meeting of Quakers, and William Penn was preaching, and he was arrested, and the jury refused to convict him. And so the British magistrate was so angry, they threw William Penn and the jurors all in prison. And William Penn, of course, the founder of Pennsylvania. And so out of that type of oppression, you had the codification of the right to assemble for the purpose of religion and for the purposes of seeking redress for public grievances. And, you look back at where these rights come from. People forget. These rights come from a history of bloodshed and tyranny and opposition. Really, you look at people like William Tyndale. William Tyndale, he translated the Bible into the English language. It was illegal at that point in time to have a copy of the Bible in the English language. He had to flee to Europe. He met Martin Luther and Melanchthon and Erasmus. He translated the Bible. The printing press was in operation. Copies were smuggled into England, and a confederacy between the Church of England and the Pope's army. They arrested him. They had a trial. He was strangled, and then he was burnt at the stake. And it is out of this type of oppression. Galileo, it was dogma at a certain point in time that the Earth was the center of the universe and that the sun rotated around the Earth. And Galileo looked through the telescope and said, well, that's not correct. But it was illegal for him to talk about it and to write about it. And eventually he was brought before the Inquisition and he was told, you will recant. And so he was forced on pain of death to say, all right, the earth doesn't move. And then the rumor is that under his breath, he said, but yet it moves. But yet still, for the last 7 years of his life, he spent under house arrest. And the problem is, guys, is that Americans, Canadians, we've had it so good for so long that people are complacent.
Yeah.
They do not recognize that the voice of dissent is a Christian principle, right? It is. You look at, I respectfully disagree with all of the people who say, well, you have to obey the civil authorities. You have to obey the civil authorities insofar as it does not conflict with the right of conscience. But the Bible is replete with examples. I mean, the Justice Center is a secular organization, civil liberties organization. Right. But this is a Christian podcast, so I mean, you guys know the Bible is replete with examples where people disobeyed the civil authorities on an issue of conscience. Right. Look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Look at Daniel. Look at the apostles when they were arrested and they were told not to preach. In the end, the angel told them to go back into this public square to preach in defiance of what the civil authorities had said. And so, like that principle of dissent and of protest is part of the roots of America, and that has trickled over into Canada. And you know, we have to exercise our fundamental rights and freedoms, otherwise we will lose them. We are one generation away at any given point in time from losing those rights and freedoms. They can be on the books, but there's this great quote from a judge. His name is Learned Hand. He's an American judge, and he said, when liberty dies in the hearts of men and women, no constitution can save it. Right? You can have a constitution, but if it is not in your heart, right, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And I would just say really quick, we've covered Romans 13 quite a lot on here, and everyone forgets the second and third verses that says, and government authorities that have been established by God are not a terror to the righteous and peacemakers and those who aren't doing anything wrong, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, what happens when a government is doing that? It sounds like in Canada, you have a bureaucrat that's saying you can't peacefully gather at a church. Well, now Romans 13 goes right out the window, like Jay pointed out. The dissent in the Christian life is throughout not only the Bible, but the early church and all those other places.
Yeah, for sure.
If you don't mind me asking, Jay, I don't know if you can or can't comment on this, but so for your Justice Center of Constitutional Freedom, what is the goal here for these two cases for Pastor James Coates and Pastor Tim Stevens? What is kind of the strategy, or what are you trying to argue to kind of, to correct this issue?
So on the Pastor Coates issue, we've filed a constitutional challenge to the public health orders, and we have assembled scientific data regarding the efficacy, right, the benefits or lack thereof of lockdowns. We have science on everything from PCR tests to what happens when you lock people in their houses with their children, you close schools, you close churches, right? You take away people's ability to earn a living. And so there's that type of analysis is going to take place in that case. And so ultimately speaking, in both cases, we're looking for a couple things. Number one, we're looking for a declaration that the state is out of line here, that they have infringed these two pastors, these two citizens' constitutional rights, and that it's not justified. Because only by establishing precedent, see, and again, this is one of the things, and I don't want to, monopolize the conversation on this point.
That's why you're here.
Yeah.
All right, right on. I think it's important to recognize that there are safeguards in the criminal context. Okay, the police cannot just randomly stop you, check your backpack, tell you to open the trunk of your car, throw you in jail for a week without a bail hearing. Right? You have to have habeas corpus. There are checks and balances. You have Miranda rights in the United States. You have Section 7, 9, 10, 11 in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You have a right to a lawyer. You have a right to be informed of the reason for your arrest and detention. You have a right to appear before a judge. You have a right to a bail hearing, right? You have all of these rights. And the reason you have these rights is because the state, it is axiomatic. The state is always getting out of line. Look at human history. It's a long history of oppression where people in positions of authority abuse the people who are underneath them. And that's why you have a constitution in the first place. And so those checks and balances are very important. They exist in the criminal context, but in the health context, you have a tremendous fear mongering. You have this fear narrative, constant fear, lockdowns. Granny's going to die. Mm-hmm. People don't read the statistics. They don't see that 99.7% of people who get this recover, most of them with no medical intervention, right? What they watch is the news. Okay. And in Canada, you have the state broadcaster, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Some people call it the Communist Broadcasting Corporation. Either works. To be honest with you,
same for us. CNN down here. So
why pull punches? The government nationalized the legacy media and gave them $600 million last year, and so there's a significant incentive for legacy media outlets to print what the government wants it to, and so you have one side of a narrative. But so that narrative is going out, and in the health context, you have no checks and balances. In Canada, you have the ability of these health officials, and it has happened, to order the arrest of somebody, to take them to a facility. There's no bail hearing. There's no right to counsel. The family isn't notified, and you think that this is like China. Yeah. But this is what was happening in Quebec, which is just north of the eastern United States. And so, this is the status quo right now in Canada. And I want to say a word about universal health care. Okay. Many Americans have been bombarded with the narrative that Canada has this tremendous universal healthcare system. Everybody has free medical. It's fantastic. America needs to have the same model. But the fact is that universal health care has been instrumental in creating, in enslaving and locking down the population, because it's government in control of health. You're not in control of your own health. All of a sudden, there's this state mandate to safeguard everybody's health,
Mm.
they canceled essential surgeries and diagnostics. And even before COVID, the situation in Canada with respect to healthcare was, very mediocre. And Americans aren't told that. If you
Right.
have money, the ability to go to the United States, many people come to the United States because, yes, Canada healthcare is free in Canada, but you're on a wait list for 2.5 years. We had a client who he slipped a disc in his back playing hockey, and he was on a wait list for 2.5 years. He went to Montana to get the surgery, right? And then he came back and he gave the Canadian government the bill, and they said, "We're not paying this because you have free healthcare in Canada." He's like, "I can't walk. I can't play with my daughter. I can't work."
Yeah.
And so, like, Americans need to understand that universal healthcare is a double-edged sword. And in Canada, the people have been suffering under what has become a health dictatorship, where you have one person who is unilaterally making, you were talking about bureaucrats, unilaterally making rules for millions of people without democratic accountability. That is run through the healthcare system.
Yeah, I mean, it's state ran control through
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
else,
Yeah.
whether it's health. I mean, and then you have either forced or coerced care or withheld care, because you have a state panel or one bureaucrat or a group of bureaucrats deciding what's best for your personal health. I've got one more question here, Jason. Did you have one?
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that we get this in before
Yes, because
we're
we'll
out
wrap up
here,
here
because
after this. Yeah.
because I know yeah, we only have so much time, but we were sent a video from your PR person that was called "The Government War on Worship," and that is on Rumble. I want to make sure that everyone goes out there and checks that out. We have to get the link to you guys.
We'll post it with the video. Yeah.
It is a great video, man. It is so good. But "The Government War on Worship," that is on Rumble. Please go check that out.
Yeah.
But sorry, go
So
ahead.
just
Yeah.
kind of off subject here, and I don't know if I've had a satisfying answer yet. So for country, and I want to get your opinion, and maybe you go, I don't know why, but to any halfway intelligent person, okay, I'm not the smartest guy, but I think I have some common sense. And I look at everything when we talk about COVID and the coronavirus and all these things, and we look at the R naught, and we look at the cases and the fatalities and the survival rates and all these things. Why has major countries, developed countries like Canada and even the United States to some extent, insisted on these year-long, year and a half long lockdowns when there's no evidence that has to be done? First of all, Corona's going to be here forever. We still have
It's been here for a
H1N1.
while
We still
already,
have
right?
bird flu. We still have, nothing gets eradicated. They always come back around. So Corona's not going away. It will be a seasonal virus. So in your opinion, I just look at it and I go, is it bureaucrats and elected officials seeking power? Is there some underlying motive that you think we have at a global level or even national level? What's your opinion on that? Because I have to think you look at these lockdowns and go, these are unnecessary, and any reasonable person would understand that, even if you're an elected official or politician.
Yeah, there are politicians asking these questions.
Good.
But they don't get coverage in the mainstream media in Canada. Now, down in the U.S., you have other media outlets who do ask some of these hard questions, and there's a counter. You have the counter part of the conversation
Sure.
to what has become the mainstream narrative. But why is it happening? I think the answer is in part. I think it's complex. I think that partly. You have people who use their authority, like Neil Ferguson, for example. He made these like crazy predictions, and they were adopted by governments. and he was wildly inaccurate.
Mm.
We know now that if you are under the age of 65 years or so, you ought to be more concerned about getting in your car to go to the grocery store than you should be afraid of COVID. For many demographics, COVID is less dangerous than a seasonal flu. And the average age of death from COVID in Alberta is 83 years of age. And the average life expectancy for the province is 82.
Oh, so you live an extra year if you get COVID.
Exactly, right? So, like this type of information is so key, but I think you have powerful people who seized control of COVID, and whether it was planned or not, I don't know. I can't say. But what is clear is that you have powerful people seize control of this narrative for the purposes of rolling back civil liberties and increasing control over society, and bringing in. I mean, you have politicians globally talking about a great reset. That's not a conspiracy theory.
Right. Not
They
at all.
want
Many
they
books
want
written on it that I've read
Read.
too. Yeah.
So there is definitely a push to change the way that society operates, and this is whether it was planned or whether it was utilized because it was convenient. Really, it might be six of one, half dozen. At the end of the day, we have foundational constitutional principles that safeguard society from tyrants.
Mm.
And those principles must be upheld and defended in the courts and by the populace in order to maintain and preserve freedom. It took centuries, okay, of hard fought wars and bloodshed and dissent, and the American experiment, okay, comes out of that history. And people forget. And so we have to make sure that in order to be free people, we have to be free ourselves and value freedom more than we value the promise, and it's a false promise, of peace and safety from the government. Well, you know what the Bible says? When they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes and they will not escape. So the narrative from government is, we will make you safe and we will keep you healthy, right? But Canada is supposed to be a free and democratic society, right? The true north, strong and free. Well, right now Canada is neither free nor is it democratic, and in various places in the United States you have the same issues. Like look at the authoritarianism in Michigan with Governor Whitmer.
Yeah.
And the arbitrary classification of what you could buy and you couldn't buy. Incidentally, we had the same thing in Manitoba, in Canada.
Wow.
And so, these are red flags where people ought to be saying, these people who are in control and in authority have too much power. And that's not how the constitutional system that we have in place is supposed to function.
Absolutely.
Right? So tyrants in check.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. J. Cameron, we know we have to wrap it up here. I know you're a busy guy, but as we do wrap this up, can you just throw out once again where people can get a hold of your organization, where they could even support it? I heard you say at the top of the show that you take no government money. So I'm assuming you take private money, endowments, things like that. Could you just let the people know where they could find your organization at?
Yeah, we are located at www.jccf.ca. We take no government funding. All we do is sue the government. And, we have been a brake for this to protect constitutional freedoms. We have been a brake when the legislature is not functioning and Parliament is not doing its job. And to some extent, sadly, the judiciary, the courts were closed. The Justice Center has acted as a brake to a significant extent. And so we appreciate your support. We have a number of American donors. And, if you want to donate to the cause of liberty and religious freedom, we're happy to have your support.
Wow, man. We just thank you so much for the fight that you're doing up there. I know how hard that fight is. Me and Jason both know that.
That's
that we have to have guys like you. We have to have organizations like that, both in Canada and the United States, on the front line, standing for principle and doing those hard fights. I mean, there's a lot of man hours, time, research. I'm sure it's just a lot of work doing what you do when you're going up against the state.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
they have essentially unlimited resources. Think about that, listeners. Unlimited resources. They have unlimited force.
Yeah.
Right. Comply by force. I mean, it's just the uphill battle you guys have, but yet you stand strong and you come to the defense of people like James Coates and Tim Stevens. It's just a wonderful thing that you're doing. Do you have anything for us, Jason, as we head out?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Jay. I mean, the only thing that I'm kind of sad about is you didn't say A one time. Don't Canadians?
Oh, yeah. You know, yeah, can they help us, eh?
We almost went through the whole episode without a dad joke, but
help us, huh?
Yeah. There you go. Oh, there we go.
Right.
We need the
What was it?
We need the applause. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, you bet.
Hey.
All right, let's wrap it up before we derail, guys. We thank you so much for listening. As always, you can just Google Dead Men Walking. We're on every social media platform. We're big on Instagram. You can find this video and this podcast, obviously, anywhere you get your pods, and on YouTube. Jay Cameron, thank you, sir, for being here. And as always, God bless.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dead Men Walking Podcast for full video podcast episodes and clips, or email us at deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.